Imagine, if you will, a Tuesday morning in 1901. The New York City skyline is barely visible, draped in a thick, sulphurous fog that smells of sea salt and coal smoke. On the wooden walkway of the Brooklyn Bridge, a patrolman is finishing his rounds, his boots clicking rhythmically against the timber. He is looking forward to a hot coffee and the end of his shift. But as the mist thins, he sees something impossible. In the middle of the bridge, a man is busy. He isn't a city worker. He is an immigrant, dressed in a worn but clean wool coat, and he is dragging heavy wooden barriers across the promenade. He is blocking the path of the horse-drawn carriages. In his hand is a hammer and a handful of nails. He is calmly, almost professionally, pinning a hand-painted sign to the railing. Says quite simply, "Toll. 5 cents." The officer rushes over, shouting, hand on his nightstick. But the man with the hammer doesn't flinch. He doesn't run. Instead, he looks at the officer with genuine confusion and a hint of indignation. He reaches into his breast pocket and pulls out a document. It is heavy, high-quality parchment, stamped with official-looking wax seals and signed in flowing, golden ink. The man tells the officer, with the utmost sincerity, that he cannot be removed. He says, "I own this bridge. I bought it yesterday for all the money I had in the world." The policeman sighs, but he isn't angry. He's exhausted. Because this was the second time that week he'd had to explain to a heartbroken stranger that the Brooklyn Bridge was not for sale. That the man who sold it to them, a charming gentleman with an expensive suit and a comforting smile, was a ghost. A man who walked through the elite circles of Manhattan, shaking hands and selling the impossible. His name was George C. Parker. And he didn't just sell bridges. He sold the most addictive substance known to man, hope. In the pantheon of great criminals, there are bank robbers who use dynamite and assassins who use steel. But George C. Parker stood alone on a pedestal of pure intellect. He never drew a weapon. His tools were a silver tongue, a perfectly tailored Irish linen suit, and a frighteningly deep understanding of human greed. He is, without question, the greatest con artist in American history. Some records suggest he sold the Brooklyn Bridge twice a week for years. But that was just the beginning. He sold Madison Square Garden. He sold the Statue of Liberty. He even sold the tomb of a former president. You might be tempted to think that people back then were simply naive. But Parker didn't just target the uneducated. He fooled bankers, wealthy tourists, and shrewd businessmen. He was a master of the psychological click. That moment where a person's logic shuts down and their ambition takes the wheel. Today we are going to peel back the layers of this brilliant, twisted mind. We will step into the fake offices he built in a single afternoon, examine the forgeries that baffled judges, and see how one man held New York City hostage with nothing but his words. But Parker's story isn't just about the money he made. It's about a fatal flaw in his own brilliance. There was a detail in his operation, a shadow of his own arrogance, that was slowly leading him toward a place no amount of charm could escape. Before we reveal the secret document that eventually destroyed his empire, make sure you are subscribed to our channel. If you believe the world belongs to those brave enough to take it, you're in the right place. Let's find out how to sell a $15 million bridge for $500 in cash. To understand George Parker, you have to understand New York at the turn of the century. It was the capital of chaos. Thousands of people were pouring into Ellis Island every single day. They were fleeing famine, war, and stagnant lives in Europe, carrying their life savings sewn into the lining of their coats. They wanted the American dream. They wanted to own a piece of the future. And George Parker? He decided he would be the one to sell it to them. Parker was a New Yorker through and through. Born to Irish parents, he saw poverty from the street level and decided he wouldn't play the game by the rules. He noticed that in America, people were treated according to the quality of their shoes and the confidence in their voice. So he became an actor whose stage was the entire city. He wasn't a salesman, he was a man burdened by success. His favorite hunting ground was the Brooklyn Bridge. In the 1890s, this was more than a bridge. It was a technological miracle, often called the eighth wonder of the world. It represented the triumph of the human spirit over nature. Parker would walk the promenade, watching the crowds with the eyes of a hawk. He wasn't looking for a beggar. He was looking for someone who looked like they had a few $100s and a desire to be someone important. His approach was a masterclass in reverse psychology. He would stand by the massive steel cables, looking out over the water, and let out a long, heavy sigh. When a victim stood near him, he would mumble just loud enough to be heard. "It's a magnificent view, isn't it? A shame it causes me so much stress." Naturally, the victim would ask why. Parker would look at them with a tired, trusting smile. "I'm the owner," he'd say. "The city gave me the toll rights to settle an old debt, but the paperwork is killing me. I just want to retire to California and plant oranges. I'm looking for a solid, honest man to take over the toll operations, but the city's bureaucracy makes it impossible to find good help. Note the genius here. He wasn't selling. He was asking for a partner. He made the victim feel special, like a peer. He would pull out a small ledger and show them fake figures. Thousands of people crossing every day, pennies turning into dollars, dollars turning into a fortune. It was a money printing machine. When he saw the victim's eyes widen, he would give them the final push. I like you, he'd say. You look like you have a head for business. I can't put this on the open market because of a complicated legal dispute with my ex-wife, but if you have a few $100s on you today, I'll sign the deed over to you right now, just to be done with it. He accepted whatever they had. $50, $500, sometimes thousands. In exchange, he gave them a piece of paper that looked more official than the Constitution itself. But Parker wasn't just a street hustler. For the bigger fish, the wealthy businessmen, he operated on a level that would make Hollywood envious. He would rent vacant office space in Manhattan for a single day. He would hire out-of-work actors to sit at desks, typing furiously and answering phones. When a mark walked into Parker's office, they saw a bustling hub of civic power. There were maps on the walls, blueprints for new subways, and assistants rushing in to ask for his signature on million-dollar contracts. It was all a play. A performance for an audience of one. By the time the victims sat down across from Parker, they were desperate to give him their money. They weren't just buying a bridge, they were buying a seat at the table of the men who built the world. Parker once decided to sell the Statue of Liberty to a visiting oil tycoon from Texas. The tycoon was arrogant, loud, and convinced he could buy anything. Parker didn't try to convince him. He simply acted as if he was hesitant to sell such a prestigious asset. They took a private boat out toward the island. Parker spoke about the statue not as a monument, but as a lighthouse for advertising. Imagine, he said, your company's name in lights on that torch. Every ship in the world will see it. The Texan was hooked. But as they approached the island, a Coast Guard boat pulled alongside them. For a moment, the world stopped. If the officers checked Parker's ID, the game was over. The Texan, in his excitement, started to wave at the officers, ready to brag about his new purchase. Parker didn't panic. He laughed, slapped the Texan on the shoulder, and whispered, "Quiet, my friend. The government is full of spies who want to keep this monument in public hands. If they know I'm selling to a Texan, the deal is dead. Silence is your greatest ally." The tycoon shut his mouth, convinced he was part of a secret society. Parker walked away with a check that would have bought a mansion, and the tycoon was left with a promise that would never come true. Parker lived like a king on this money. He stayed in the Waldorf Astoria. He ate at Delmonico's, tipping waiters with $20 bills as if they were nickels. He was a hero in the bars of Broadway, a man who seemed to have figured out a secret code for infinite wealth. He became addicted to the high of the con. It wasn't about the cash anymore, it was about the feeling of being smarter than everyone else. He looked at the city of New York and didn't see a community, he saw a chessboard. But arrogance has a way of blinding even the sharpest minds. By 1908, the NYPD was tired of being the laughingstock of the country. Every week, a new immigrant was being arrested for trying to build a toll booth on the Brooklyn Bridge, and every week the newspapers mocked the police for failing to catch the man behind it. They formed a task force. They started patrolling the bridges in plain clothes. They began to study Parker's patterns, his suits, his favorite bars. Parker felt the walls closing in. He started using disguises, fake beards, glasses, different accents. He moved his operations to the tomb of General Grant or the Madison Square Garden. But he couldn't stop. He was a compulsive seller. He once said that his victims were just as guilty as he was, because a truly honest man wouldn't try to buy a public bridge for a few $100s. In his mind, he wasn't a thief, he was a teacher of hard lessons. His luck finally ran out in 1928. It wasn't a grand bridge sale that caught him. It was a mistake. A small, stupid mistake. He was caught cashing a forged check for a relatively small amount. But this time the charm didn't work. The judge knew exactly who was standing in his courtroom. Parker had been convicted of fraud before, but he had always managed to talk his way out of long sentences or escape from custody. One time he reportedly walked out of a courthouse by simply putting on a lawyer's coat that was hanging on a rack and strolling past the guards. But in 1928 the laws had changed. New York had implemented the four-time loser law. This meant that on your fourth felony conviction, the sentence was mandatory life in prison. No matter how many bridges you had sold, no matter how many people you had charmed. The gavel came down with the weight of a closing tomb. George C. Parker was sentenced to life in Sing Sing. You would think a man like Parker would wither away in a cage. But he was a performer, and a performer always needs an audience. In Sing Sing he became a legend. The other inmates, the murderers, the bank robbers, the tough guys, they didn't look down on him. They treated him like a king. They would sit around him in the prison yard, mesmerized by his stories. "Tell us again, George," they'd say. "Tell us about the time you sold the Statue of Liberty to the Texan." And George would perform. He would act out every voice, every gesture, bringing the outside world into the gray walls of the prison. Legend has it that he even tried to sell the prison itself to a new young guard. He promised the guard that if he could just get a small down payment, he would make him the warden of a new luxury hotel he was planning to build on the site. The guard didn't fall for it, but the fact that Parker tried shows that the salesman was alive until the very end. He died in 1936 behind bars, but he never truly stopped selling. Today, when you walk across the Brooklyn Bridge, you are walking on the stage of the greatest theater in New York history. The famous American saying, "If you believe that I've got a bridge to sell you," exists because of George Parker. He became a part of the DNA of the city. He was a criminal, yes. He took money from people who could ill afford to lose it. But he also exposed a fundamental truth about our world. He showed us that value is an illusion. A piece of paper is worth millions if you believe in the signature. A bridge belongs to whoever has the confidence to claim it. Parker sold lies, but his victims bought dreams. And in a world as hard as 1900s New York, sometimes a dream is worth more than the cash in your pocket. The next time someone offers you an opportunity that seems too good to be true, think of George. Think of the man in the linen suit with the forged deed. Because the George Parkers of today don't hang out on bridges anymore. They are in your inbox, they are on your social media feeds, and they are still selling the exact same thing. A shortcut to the life you've always wanted. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the mind of a master, write the phrase, "The bridge is mine," in the comments so I know you made it to the end of the story. And don't go anywhere. There is a video on your screen right now about Victor Lustig, the man who actually sold the Eiffel Tower for scrap metal. If you thought Parker was bold, wait until you see what Lustig did in Paris. Click that video and I'll see you in the next.